Okay, just a quick introduction about Business Clinic. Initiative was started about 2 months back. I think exactly 15th of May, we did the inauguration. There was we felt there was a lot of need for. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
There was a lot of need by the small scale and medium scale industries to sort out many perennial problems which they were not able to get good expert advice. So we thought if you're able to put together uh, an organization or an institution which can bring the companies and advisors together, it will be. So on that we started. I'm so happy that we've got extremely good advisors, and we already done a lot of consultations. I'll take you through this. So this was the reason why we started this. Next slide, please. We wanted to find solutions. Yeah, next. Yeah, our value proposition, basically, we thought, the timely, effective, and affordable. More than all this, I think what we had in our mind was, when if you look at the evolution of cricket, started with Test match, then it moved to One Day International, then it moved to T20. So we said, why don't we do something like a T20 in management consulting also? So this particular thing is, you've got to be swift, you've got to be fast. You should not get into a long-winded consultation. So the way it works is next. So basically, we are, the way it works, I'll explain to you. It's helping people on three fronts. We are offering, which is called the three fronts. One is the plan to win, which is basically looking at leadership traits. How can we help people become better leaders? It is more on the coaching side, where you have with us here, Chand, me, Ram, all of us are certified leadership coaches to help people enhance their behavioral skills and help them perform better. And then on plan to win, we have been conducting some business planning workshops, which spreads over 2 days. But now we have developed certain things which can be done over 3 or 4 sessions to help organizations build business plans effectively using some time-tested models. The third one, of course, is Prime Solutions, which we are talking about, which is basically the business clinic, what it was started for. This is trying to find solutions for issues. And explaining all this in this is what we do is in the business planning workshop. What we do is, like we look at models like Porter's 5 forces, Ansoff matrix. We look at Eisenhower matrix. We look at various things. Pestel. We do it with a company and then find out where are the internal issues and external opportunities, and try and help them come with a plan to set objective strategies and action plans. So at the end of the session, the company can walk away with a beautiful business plan which is created by them, which is assisted by us. This is the first part. On procedure to lead, basically it's leadership coaching, and we have helped. We are now coming out with 2-3 interesting ideas as to in a month how can we look at providing 2 or 3 leadership topics to individuals and an open seminar type, open webinar type. I think this will get aligned. In addition to that, we will do a normal coaching process, which will extend for 6 months' time. Prime Solutions is what I think all of you are aware of. This is what we have done. I mean, the way it works is next. I will take you through this. First is the client contacts us, and then after some clarification, we exchange some names and get some clarity on what the problems are. Later on, we go get into a Zoom call for about 2 hours, try and solve the problems and set them an action plan. It should be about 7 to 8 points, and then we do request them to come back for a review. Some of the areas where we consult are revenue generation, cost reduction, strategy execution, raising capital, mergers and acquisition, innovation, R&D, sales, marketing, market research. There are several areas which we do. But let me tell you, we don't take large projects. We look at spot problems, try and help clients fix the problems on that issue. And we also do analytics, corporate social responsibility. We have experts in all the areas. Yeah. Some challenges we have helped solve. An industrial was so product manufacturing company wanted to streamline manufacturing during the COVID period. So we, with the help of a good advisor, we were able to help him give some solutions. Another one was specialty clinic, which is about a year old, wanted to increase footfalls. So we went through what we've done all this time and found out opportunities, how we can do it through social media marketing and other PR and word of mouth. One consumer product company wanted to redesign their packaging and optimize costs. So that we helped them. Consumer product company wanted to revalidate the product and launch plans. They had put something, they had something in their mind. They wanted to revalidate it. So this is, and then a home care manufacturing company wanted to refine their sales and distribution. Like this, so I think I'm happy to tell you in the last 2 months' time, we have done close to about 15%. So the founding team is one is me, next is Ram, and the third one is Anush, my son. I think three of us are running this organization. We hope it will go well. This cannot happen without the help of our expert advisors who are there. I think you can see the details of all of them in our website. I think outstanding piece of work we do as a team. There are a lot of good testimonials we got, Mr. Marudra and many other testimonials we got. We thought we'd just share with you some. Okay, on top of it, I thought, in addition to doing consultation, one more thing we thought was we have to share knowledge to not only to our clients, to everybody who is associated with us. That's how this the subdivision of this called InfoX was born. Here, what we do is right now, once a month, which is actually the 15th of every month, like today we are going to meet, we get one of our expert advisors to speak on a subject. So the third one, first one was by Dr. Subramaniam, then R&D and innovation. Second one was by Rajesh Srivastava on marketing. Now, Vaitheeswaran is here with us to talk about legal and taxation. We're going to continue this every 15th of every month, so please mark your calendars. And we'll also keep sending you reminders. So every month, 15th, 5 p.m. We want to meet and share with you. This was the first one which happened in May. This Dr. Subramaniam spoke. Rajesh Srivastava in June. Now, Mr. Vaitheeswaran today. And we have a couple of more things we are going to do this year. Yeah. So this is again, this is what we are calling is another new thing which we want to do around the 30th of every month. This is called the crosstalk, where we are going to invite 3 of our advisors, and they will be in 3 breakout rooms in the Zoom. So then we are going to invite participation in this, and then they can choose which room they want to be. Clients can be, or respondents can go and sit in each room and ask any question they want to an expert advisor, and they'll be happy to help you. I mean, you cannot ask a large problem, but still, some clarifications we can do. This is a new concept we're trying. For a period of time, we would like to, give this opportunity for our clients to meet all our advisors. We're looking at 3 at a time. So the first one we're going to start on July 30th, 5 p.m. again. So please note this date also, please. And okay, Ram and me are doing a business planning workshop for Madras Management. This is around 27th, 28th of this month. This is their program. They requested us to come and so feel free to contact us for any help, anything. And I'm so happy that all of you are here today. So with this, I will request Ram to take you forward.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Rajsekharan. Now we go to the topic of the webinar for today. We have with us Mr. Vaitheeswaran, who doesn't actually need any introduction. Almost everybody in the industry knows him. He's a very, very well-renowned legal and tax expert. He's considered a specialist in the legal and tax matters with in-depth knowledge of business and tax laws. He has more than 30 years of experience. He's been advising a lot of companies, as well as he has appeared before appellate tribunals and courts in matters relating to a wide variety of categories like domestic and international tax laws, GST, excise, customs, service tax, company law. So you name it, I mean, anything in legal and taxation, like he's he's the expert who people really go to for getting their issues solved and challenges met, etc. He's a very very sought after speaker. In fact, we were just discussing at the beginning of the session that he's in fact addressing webinars in multiple cities and multiple countries every day. He has 2-3 sessions every day, so it's very very busy person. And the Business Clinic really thanks him that he has taken time out for us to kind of talk to us and explain to us this topic and take questions. He's also an expert in real estate contracts. He's a chairman of expert committee of GST in Madras Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he's also a member of the General Committee of Madras Chamber. He's a member of Finance and Taxation Committee of CII Southern Region, and also the Vice President of the Revenue Bar Association. He's recipient of several awards, including Vocational Excellence Award from Rotary Club of Madras Southwest, and he's also involved in a lot of social causes. So welcome, Mr. Vaitheeswaran. We are very, very eager to, listen from you, hear from you on this topic. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ram, and good evening to all. We are definitely living in different times, and virtual world has completely opened up all vistas, and we have people across the world sitting on this discussion. And it's interesting to note that in fact, just before it was opened up for all the other people, we had a couple of chat with the advisors. It was interesting to note it was almost like a news channel with Chennai reporting and Delhi reporting and Kuala Lumpur reporting as to where we stand on COVID. Well, that takes me to the topic. This is going to be a very focused presentation on laws and taxes around COVID. I'll try to make it as practical as possible. Wherever it's technical, I'll try to mull over a bit and try to dilute it so that members across the board would be able to understand. Next. So we are all now, first of all, we've learned the word pandemic. Many of us didn't know the word pandemic till it was announced. We knew epidemic, and we slowly graduated the word pandemic. And we are also learning new things like lockdown, shutdown, and restrictions. Imagine if you're a person from Chennai, imagine Marina Beach being closed down. We could never imagine that there were doors to Marina Beach, but we realized that Marina Beach can be shut down. Entire public venues can be shut down. Businesses can be called upon to shut down in a typical, free environment. People asked to close, and people voluntarily closing. And this is definitely an unprecedented challenge. I don't envy the position of the government. They are doing their level best both at the center and the state, and it's a huge battle which they are facing. They need to handle the health infra, they need to handle the numbers, they need to handle the volume, they need to handle the criticism. It's just not the best place to be in, but kudos to the government officials and so many, soldiers, foot soldiers, the corporation officials, each of them still doing their respective jobs. It's something fantastic. But from a business perspective, yes, there's a huge disruption. In fact, just a year ago or 2 years ago, we used to talk about disruption. Uber was a disruption. Swiggy was a disruption. So we used to talk about, new innovations being disruption and how disruption can completely change your business. Nobody imagined that COVID would be some kind of a level player disruptor, that it disrupted everybody, whether it is business or profession, it has completely disrupted everybody. It has impacted employment. It has put a question mark on compliance and regulation. It has created a lot of debate around what kind of tax payments you have. Courts are also battling with COVID and how to deal with, how to conduct courts in the COVID environment. And contracts for the first time have been pulled out from the drawer, and people are using magnifying glasses to understand each clause and see where they stand. Next. So let me look at it from a business perspective. Well, you had mandated lockdown. So you had orders being passed under the National Disaster Management Act, and people were forced to lock down, people were forced to close down their factories. Warehouses are closed, malls and theaters remain closed. Just could you imagine that, what kind of pressures that can be on anybody who has got their business located there. Earlier itself, the business survival was based on footfalls, and the footfalls are completely ruled out because the malls are closed and theaters are closed. Imagine the kind of cost theaters will have to run. Already you had this challenge of movies not running. So if a movie did 2 weeks, it was a great success. That was a kind of thing on theater. And now you continue to maintain the theater, you continue to incur your salaries and overheads, but you don't see revenues. You don't see when it's going to open. And even if it opens, you don't know how it's going to open. They probably will insist that the second seat should be vacant, or every alternate seat should be vacant. Or they may insist that AC should be switched off. If AC is switched off, nobody's going to go to the theater. So all kinds of worries across businesses. Hospitality. the kind of toll that is had on this business is very sad. Every person whom we know, whether it is a big player or a small player or a middle-level player, they're all affected. And there are a lot of chains which use their profits in terms of whatever profits was flowed back into further investments and opening of branches. So there are chains which survived on creating number of units rather than just running their existing 2 or 3 units. And all those things, you have rental cost, you have employee cost, you have issues of people traveling out of their location, migration has happened, and how are they going to come back, and how is revenue going to come back? So it's a huge impact. Travel, all of us know what kind of impact. All of us are have taken travel so casually that waking up at 4 o'clock and rushing to the airport and taking a 6 o'clock flight and going to Delhi and coming back the same day was just a matter of an ordinary event. And today it's quite an interesting feat to even see a plane in the sky. So while you're walking in the terrace, I've actually started counting the number of planes that fly between 5 to 7 in the evening. So that is a kind of life that has happened in terms of travel. Tourism, again, a huge impact. In fact, a lot of money is also stuck. People have booked tickets, and tourism companies are stuck. They're booked in advance, various hotels and holidays. Media, even though you may have interesting criticism flowing from media, many of the media companies, including television channels, are bleeding because advertisements have stopped, and most of the advertisements are confined to certain products which are relevant to COVID. And you would have also seen the insurance advertisements jumping up, in this kind of mood. So you look at every sector that's got an impact, and all of them has got some kind of cycling impact. Entertainment, of course, it's slowly jumping back, but again, huge impact. Real estate, we'll talk about in depth a little bit later. Next. Well, if that is a case of business, let's look at profession. Accounting, audit, and secretarial services. Accounting has got an impact because if clients are hit, then your requirement for accounting is also hit. A lot of companies are reporting lesser numbers, significant lesser numbers. Of course, the June numbers seem to be slightly indicative of growth. Audit is now trying to become virtual. Audit are trying to discover new ways of finding out how audit can be done without an in-entry physical verification. Secretarial services are down. Legal services are equally down because courts are closed, and wherever courts are open, it is opening in a limited manner. You have virtual courts, and there are some challenges in virtual courts in terms of bigger matters. IT services, companies which are totally dependent upon foreign clients, and pandemic has affected the world as such. So if you have an IT service company which is servicing a company in Europe, and the European client is in trouble, then the outsourced IT service is also in trouble. Similarly, support service and enabled service are all overall servicing the US economy or the UK, the European economy are in trouble. And it's a question of, it's very interesting because nobody visualized this. How much ever you do in terms of planning, in terms of resources, in terms of working capital, in terms of reserves and capital which you've saved, buffer chest, the treasure chest that you have, all that you do, you're still surprised by the fact that the salary cost is so huge. And you don't have the money trickling in to pay over it. So every business and profession is clearly struggling. And then we have this new norm, work from home. See, initially, if you look at work from home, the IT sector was always used to it. The IT sector and IT-enabled sector was always used to it. And many of the startup companies evolved from coffee shops. And from there, they moved to co-working spaces. So it was very interesting that for them, it was just a normal thing, getting back to work again from home. But a lot of other businesses, manufacturers, for example, would have never imagined that they would work from home. Many of the people who are in the manufacturing sector always believe, tugging their lunchbox, getting into a bus, traveling for about 95 minutes, and then landing at a place very early in the morning and working there, and then leaving that place quite late in the evening. And now let's look at what's happening. Design work has come home. Planning and coordination work is done from home. Accounting has moved home even for manufacturing sectors. In fact, I know cases where in the initial lockdown period, some of the manufacturing companies scrambled and pulled out all their desktops which they had, did some little bit of repair and hired lorries as quick as possible and rushed desktops home to employees to work. But they never imagined that they would need laptops to work for manufacturing segments. But now, of course, the moment lockdown is lifted, laptop business soared. The kind of orders that were placed on laptops is unbelievable because everybody was buying in 50s and 100s to ensure that before it closes again, they will give the gadget to the employee so they can work from home and work can go on. Documentation has gone home. Now, obviously, all this opens up a typical issue of data privacy. How much of data is being handled by the employee? How much of data is privacy oriented? How much is confidentiality oriented? Is the client happy with the fact that his data is being handled at residences? And you also have challenges when the employee uses multiple gadgets. For example, he may have a laptop on his own, and that may not be as protected as the company laptop or company gadget. And he suddenly switches to a telephone to use the Wi-Fi, to use the call at that point of time, and the telephone may not be protected at the way the laptop is protected. Or the very same not many can afford multiple laptops, so his laptop he shares with his daughter or son, and his daughter or son looks at the internet and looks at various sites, and there is a possibility that there could be some kind of Trojan which sits in the laptop because of that, or a malware that gets attached to the laptop. So how would you monitor all this? Employer cannot monitor all these things. Emails are getting very, very tricky. Video conferencing, you also have people, Zoom is always a debate as to whether it is secure or not. You have people having their, the debates like the Vijay TV debate, Zoom versus WebEx debates keep going on. So WebEx versus Microsoft Teams debate goes on. And interestingly, from my side, the tax authorities at the lower level and the commissioner at this level have decided that forget WebEx, forget Zoom. Let's do our hearing through WhatsApp video. So some of the cases I also conduct through WhatsApp video calls. So things are very interesting in that segment. And then there are companies which deal with trade secrets and how much of trade secrets reside in the residence. And companies try to draft work from home guidelines and share it with the employee to ensure that nothing is violated. So it's a huge challenge, but it is very, very interesting the way it's going forward. So let me peg some of the questions which the audience would be having in their mind. I'm going to make this presentation as some kind of answers to these questions. So my first question is, since I've not opened my office during lockdown, can I avoid payment of rent? Then from a landlord's perspective, what action is possible for recovering monies due? Can I delay payments to my vendors and subcontractors? Am I legally bound to pay wages during lockdown period? What is this force majeure is everybody's talking about? What is the meaning of impossibility in contract? What are my income tax and GST obligations on account of COVID? So these are the key questions I think which should cover the legal and aspects surrounding this pandemic. Next. So let me first go into this little bit of legal journey, but not so complex. We always use legal maxims, and there is this wonderful maxim called as lex non cogit ad impossibilia, which translates as a law cannot compel a man to do that which he cannot possibly perform. Can any law force somebody to do something which he cannot obviously do? So way back in 1863, there was an opera house, and that was rented for holding a concert. And there was a huge fire accident and the opera house got destroyed. And the decision at that point of time was saying that the whole purpose of having an opera house was to have this performance and hold concerts. If the opera house itself is destroyed, you cannot insist on the contract obligation, and therefore the contract stands frustrated. But interestingly, the same decision was overturned by the House of Lords in 81, where you had this, in UK you have this interesting thing. If there is a heritage building, they identify a building as a heritage building. They take care to protect that building to ensure that it is kept for posterity and history. And they did identify one such building. And there were a lot of small repairs that were required, and the building was in danger of collapse. So what happened was that entire street, both sides, access as well as going out, was completely blocked. And for a 20-month period, that road was blocked for the work to be done for this heritage building. Now, one company had a warehouse in that particular street. And for 20 months, they could not operate that warehouse. And therefore, the warehouse, the tenant tried to say that I'm not able to pay the lease rent because the contract is destroyed. 20 months, I'm not even able to have access to this place. Whereas the court said, no, interruption of a 20-month period of a 10-year lease period is not significant to destroy the object of the contract. You're still bound to pay the rental obligations, pay the rent. Next. This maxim has been applied even in the context of Indian courts. This is very much close to businesses. In the VAT regime, you had this peculiar condition that your ITC was depending upon the selling dealer paying the tax to the government account. And there were truant selling dealers or defaulting selling dealers who merely used to sell, collect the tax and not pay to the government account. And the buyer's ITC was denied. So this matter came before the Delhi High Court. And Delhi High Court said, look, the buyer has bought the goods. He has received the invoice. if 1 lakh is the value and 10,000 is the tax, he has paid 1 lakh and 10,000 to the supplier. What more can you expect the buyer to do? You can't expect the buyer to go behind the seller's office and find out whether he has paid the tax. And therefore, you cannot, put an impact on him because of the fault of a seller. And therefore, they said you cannot take action against him. And they applied the principle of impossible by saying that you're compelling the buyer to do the impossible. Now, this decision is of interest because the GST regime has got a similar provision. Look at the GST law. Today, if I'm a recipient and I've bought goods or services from a supplier, one of the conditions is that I must find out whether the supplier has paid the GST to the government account. The same condition is an onerous condition. It is almost impossible. For example, let us take a telephone bill. How would I know whether the telephone company has paid the tax or not? Or how would I know that the vendor has paid the tax or not? So I can take some steps. I can check whether he is a bona fide supplier. I can check whether he is duly registered. I can check the website whether he is still in operation. I can check whether I paid the invoices. I can check whether the invoice is genuine. But beyond that, I cannot do much of work. So these principles are still relevant and applicable. Next. The concept or the doctrine of frustration was brought out brilliantly in this judgment, where typically, if you remember the history, there was this coronation ceremony where it was a big event. The king would get coronated and he would walk through the city and the entire public would watch him and watch the entire ceremony. So one fellow hired an apartment, and the reason for hiring the apartment was that it had the best view for watching the royal procession as it moved about. Now, he had hired that balcony and that apartment only to look at the procession. And the coronation ceremony was cancelled. And the king was not coronated on that date. And therefore, Henry refused to pay the rent. And then the matter went to court. And the court said that the foundation of the contract was the coronation ceremony. And since the king's coronation did not even take place, he is no longer bound to pay the rent. Next. I can skip this, very technical. I can skip this. Now, these are decisions of the Supreme Court where you always have to understand that courts would take different views on different facts, and sometimes they also evolve in terms of decision making. So here the court says the word impossible has not been used in the sense of physical or literal impossibility. The performance of an act may not be literally impossible, but it may be impractical and useless from the point of view of the object and purpose which the parties had in view. And therefore, if an untoward event or change of circumstances totally upsets the very foundation upon which the parties rested their bargain, then it is very well possible to say that it has become impossible. Next. When you get the feeling that, okay, this gives me some confidence, I can use COVID as an excuse, etc., please read this decision also, where the Suez Canal was closed. And since Suez Canal was closed, the shipping line said, look, Suez Canal was a route which we used to take to supply the goods. And now that Suez Canal was closed, we cannot use that route. And therefore, I'm not able to supply the goods. Then the court said that, yes, it is your customary route. But that doesn't mean that the contract is frustrated. Then the person argued saying that if I take an alternate route, it is extremely costly because it's a circuitous route. But the court said, no, even if it's an expensive mode of shipping, the contract is to supply the goods and deliver the goods. And therefore, even though the contract has become difficult to perform, it is not fundamentally altered. So there's a very interesting contrast in the sense that COVID, you have peculiar scenarios where certain ports are closed, certain ports are open, certain ports restrict cargo entry completely, certain ships are stuck halfway, certain ships, so for example, if a ship is going to a particular port and the port is closed, then the ship would not wait. It will go to the nearest port and dump the cargo and go. Now, it is your responsibility to get back the cargo from that country. So, how are we going to deal with all this? The next 10 years will be riddled with litigation and decisions on all these things. Next. Almost akin to our COVID, we had this, I would say the predecessor of COVID was SARS. And when SARS happened, there was this typical isolation game was going on at that point of time. So tenant was subject to a 10-day isolation order. And he was 13 months into a 24-month lease. And then he sought to invoke frustration, saying that my lease has collapsed because of SARS. The court, Hong Kong court, rejected the tenant's argument and said that the isolation was only a short duration in the context of the entire lease. It does not significantly change your contractual rights and obligations. This kind of gives a close indication to what kind of decisions courts are likely to render in the context of COVID. Next. In fact, decisions have already come from our High Court in the context of COVID. One fellow filed a petition under the Arbitration Act, and his prayer was to restrain the bank from negotiating and encashing the LC because of COVID. The court said that, look, steel is definitely an essential commodity even under COVID, and ports are also functional. So you cannot avoid your payment obligation on account of difficulties in selling after import on account of lockdown. And therefore, they refused to entertain the petition and did not grant the interim relief. Next. And here again, one person moved a petition for seeking encashment of bank guarantee, and industrial activities were shut down due to national lockdown. And the past non-performance of contractor cannot be condoned due to COVID in March 1920 in India. And the court said that you are in breach from September 19. It is not as if COVID has made the breach happen. You are already in breach. Therefore, you cannot use COVID and as an excuse to get out of your contract obligation. This is a view of the Delhi High Court post-COVID. So let me try to give you some answers. I've given you the questions. I've given you the legal perspective. So let me try to give you some answers. So you could be a lessor. Let us say you have put in your hard-earned money. You have borrowed money and put up a 3-floor office complex which you have let out, or just a 2,000 square feet building which you have let out to somebody, or a warehouse you have let out to somebody. This is from a lessor perspective. You could be a lessee, where you have no access to the office. You're not able to enter the office. You're not allowed to enter that premises. That area is in a red zone, or the lockdown has got so much of restrictions. So what you should do is, first of all, read the contract. So you have to go back and read the contract and see, is there a force majeure clause? Normally, most of the contracts would have a force majeure clause if it has been drafted reasonably well. Most professionals would have taken care of it. A force majeure contract would say that in the event of so-and-so, so-and-so, for example, war or earthquake or disease, or they may not have used the word pandemic, though I used to use the words long time back in contracts. They would have used the word epidemic. So epidemic or things like that, if your ability to perform has been curtailed or affected, then it is called as a force majeure, and you're entitled to put notice to the other person and say, look, I won't be able to perform because of these reasons. So if you have a force majeure clause, you have to see the scope and ambit of the force majeure clause, and you have to exercise the next level action as contemplated in the agreement. It is later on, you cannot simply say, I had a force majeure clause. No point in having a force majeure clause unless you act upon it. Now, if force majeure clause does not exist, then there could be a problem, because it is not possible to say that the contract has been completely frustrated. You cannot say that your obligation to pay rent has completely ceased. So it is more from impossible versus difficult kind of thing. And my advice to most clients at this point of time is that try to use negotiation skills. Let's look at each person's perspective. Let's look at the landowner's perspective or the property owner's perspective. Now he's got problems because he needs money to pay his costs, etc. And you got problems because you're not able to generate revenue to pay the rent. And if both of you talk to each other, there is a possibility that there could be some kind of waiver, some kind of reduction, some kind of deferment. All these are possible on negotiation, but a very rigid and hard stand can always, create issues. Then you have contracts for work. Now you have to renegotiate and look at the contract for work. Is the work even relevant? For example, you might have given a contract, might have given an order for supply of certain things, and those things will be completely irrelevant in the given scenario of COVID. And you may also look at a supply contract and see whether the supply contract is relevant or not. So each time you have to look at your termination process, look at whether you can walk out legally, or if you cannot walk out, what are the best ways to salvage the issue. Next. From a business perspective, what are the answers? You need to implement the most effective working capital management system. Now, I know how businesses operate. Now, if you're a very big entity, you will have a huge finance department, you will have a costing department, you will probably have guys who are focused on working capital. You will be able to do all kinds of, you'll have good expert brains almost working all the time. But if you're a small entity, and today small is nothing wrong in being small, because a small is the engine for growth in the country. So you may be a small entity and medium entity. You may even have a finance head, you may have a CFO, but you may not have a very big team. And your decision making on expenditure would be depending upon what is urgent at that point of time, which is priority at that point of time, which is, you borrowed money from somewhere, you borrowed at horrible rates of interest, and somebody is threatening all kinds of action. Your first approach will be to first pay that money. Then somebody gives you a WhatsApp message saying Supreme Court has said you should pay wages. Or somebody would share a message saying that there is a circular which says you must pay your wages. And, there's all kinds of pressure on whether wages takes priority. Or then there is another note, a WhatsApp message saying that if you don't pay your taxes, these are your consequences. So what happens with tax? So you have to debate between tax, employee cost, provident fund obligations, rental obligations, interest obligations, money to your subcontractors, money to your vendors, money for raw material purchases, interest payment on your overdraft. So all this cannot be just like that whimsically decided. You cannot choose one and prevail over the other. So it requires tremendous amount of working capital planning. You need to, some degree of forecast is required as to what kind of revenues are you likely to get. I know things are bad and revenues are not easy to get, but you need to do tremendous amount of cash flow planning and then look at all the schemes that are available. Borrow if critical, because most of the schemes are only saying we are extending all kinds of credit to you, go and borrow. But please remember that you are the borrower and at some point you have to repay the loan. So just because some credit is announced doesn't mean that you must go immediately and take that money unless it is of relevance and it is critical and it is of use. If it is of use, then yes. If it is going to channel further resources and through the resources further revenues are going to come, yes. But if it's just going to give you some kind of breathing space for 6 months or 1 year, what happens after 1 year? Are you going to recover enough to pay off this interest also and this loan also? So you have to examine all channels of credit and look at all those things. And wherever possible, look at your inventory, liquidate inventory as quickly as possible. There will be takers if price comes down. I've seen in many businesses, the biggest problem is that many businesses hold back on the price because this was the profit which I had in mind. Well, what you had in mind and what can be in realistic environment is completely different. Yes, everybody is going through a bad phase, but at some point of time, you may have to look at liquidating your inventory to get the cash flow to fund something else. So that could be better to reduce profit expectations or even cover costs, or sometimes sell a little below cost also to ensure that some cash flow is generated and that cash flow is effectively used for some other opportunity. For example, let us say that today you're in a chemical business or you're in a chemical linked product business, and you have a set of products which are not going so well. And you already developed a new product for a sanitizer, or you have developed a new product for a COVID soap solution, and there's a huge demand for it. And you don't have cash flow for manufacturing huge stock because you need to have a receivable cycle. Now, this is the point of time when you have to decide, like, look, this is going to create a new market. I'm going to get instant possible sales, and my cash flow is likely to increase because of that, and my recovery is faster. Then you should liquidate your whole inventory. Look at get some cash out of whatever you can salvage, and then put that money into the new idea or new business and get some money out of that. Because a lot of entrepreneurial instinct will play a very big role. Trust your instincts. You've been an entrepreneur for so many years. You've been a business head for so many years, and this is, in fact, I'm a lawyer and a tax consultant. I'm not a business consultant, but I run my own firm. So to a large extent, what I have done, what I do, or what I advise my friends to do is see if you can think as if you're a fresh player in the game. See if you can think that you're starting business for the first time, or the effort that you put in if you're going to do business for the first time. These are very difficult times, and you have to tide over these times. And if you get back to those kind of things, you'll be surprised by the raw energy that you have, and your old smart instincts will take over. And that would help you tide over the crisis and come up with different solutions. Next. Real estate, the impact is huge. Everyone is impacted. Global impact is even more there on decision making. So obviously, investment decisions will be deferred. And the next assets in play for the next few years is going to be like this. Whether you like it or not, gold and gold funds are going to be at the top. Deposits are still going to be there despite all the scary messages that we see in the WhatsApp. Yes, share market is going crazy. The indexes, the exchanges are, the prices are quite high, but safety is always important. I don't see any reason why it should be at this high level. So unless you know that market, unless you know that business, unless you're really sure as to what you're doing, it can be easily like a sliding scale. Be very, very careful. Select equities are definitely a possibility. Going back to real estate, yeah. Next slide, please. Look at residential developers. There is going to be delay in completion of projects. Therefore, if you've invested money and you're putting money with the developer and you're waiting for an apartment, you must expect some kind of delays. And many of the delays have been condoned by RERA as extended time. And most developers are also communicative when they explain the problem to the buyers. Customers may not see value or priority, and customers may not pay on time, which is a problem for the developers. So mega new projects are unlikely, and there will be tremendous focus on liquidating inventory. Most real estate companies are stuck with a lot of inventory, and they would like to liquidate as much as possible. So there's also there is a market. If you're a buyer and you're looking at a good deal, there's a possibility that you can get a good deal. One interesting development is that commercial is going to be very different. Before COVID, there could be 100 buses flying all over points in the city and going to a particular area where there is a 7th floor IT company, and all these 100 buses will deposit all these employees. They will all go to the 7th floors and keep working. And you have a canteen, you have air conditioning, and then evening all the 100 buses come back and take back all these employees back to the city. Now work from home. So these companies will think again. And why do I need to bring back all my employees to work? I don't need buses cost. I don't need transportation cost. I don't need 7 floors. I'll give away 5 floors. 2 floors is enough. And productivity has increased. Cost has come down. So this is much more better in the COVID environment, and therefore things would change. Which would mean what? Suddenly 7 floors which were tenanted would become 2 floors tenanted. So 5 floors have become vacant. So there is going to be a sudden overflow of stock or property that is available for rent in the commercial segment. So you would have a possible surplus in the market in the commercial space. Next. Huge impact on contractors, because they always had this challenges on cash flow, and they're going to face it even more. Their another problem is that the labor has left. Many of the laborers have left their states. It's a very sad story that many of them took their journey by foot and went back. Imagine the plight of a person traveling days and days to go to somewhere in Jharkhand or Bihar. First of all, emotionally he'll be weak. Physically he'll be exhausted. He may also be sick. And by the time he recovers, it will take some time. And even if he recovers, his family would not be keen to let him go again. They'd probably say that why don't you get back to agriculture or go back to something else. So labor may not return is a huge challenge which we'll have to keep in mind. So if you're in business where you're totally depending upon migrant labor, you please be ready for alternatives and plan it accordingly. Delays in payments, pause in fresh projects, and pending payments and contractual disputes. Next. Now coming to the tax front. When every businesses has got its lockdown and restriction problems, the government also understood the problem and passed an ordinance and said that, okay, we'll extend time. So you should read all the time limits in various legislations, whether Income Tax Act or Wealth Tax Act or Commodities Transaction, everything has been extended. Next. So what does it mean by extension? So if there is a time limit by which an income tax officer should pass an assessment order, that has been extended. If there is a time limit by which a notice has to be issued, extended. If there is a time limit which is specified in a notification or an approval, that stands extended. Same benefit applies to you. If you have to file an appeal by 31st of March, it stands extended. If you have to give a reply by 30th of April, it stands extended. If you are supposed to furnish a particular document or statement by a particular date, that stands extended. Next. For example, you might have sold a property, and out of the money that you receive from the property, we call it capital gains. You are supposed to invest in another property for you to gain the benefit of lesser taxation or no taxation. And therefore, you have committed that I will buy a house or I will construct a house within 3 years' time. And the 3 years will be expiring by 31st March or 30th June. And you may be technically stuck. And therefore, the law has been amended saying that don't worry, all that stands extended to 30th September 2020. Next. I wouldn't say there's a great relief. What the government has said is the rate of interest for the period of delay in payment of your tax, whether it is your income tax, advance tax, or TDS, etc. They only said that the interest would be calculated, which will not exceed 3/4% for every month. So it is not as if they waived the interest. I would have appreciated if they actually waived the interest. They only said the interest would be reduced. No penalty would be there, no prosecution would be there. Some small, some gain. But definitely, these are times when government should have been a little more liberal. Next. We now have the PM's Care Fund. This is law has been amended to ensure that money can be put to the PM's Care Fund, and whatever contribution you make to the PM Care Fund will qualify for a deduction. Next. Just like how income tax time limits were extended, all the time limits in the erstwhile Central Excise Law, Customs Tariff, Customs Act, Service Tax Law have all got extended. So, for example, if you're in receipt of an order under Service Tax Law and you're supposed to file an appeal and you could not file the appeal because of lockdown, not to worry. Time stands extended to 30th September 2020. Next. GST, they have decided to do it differently. What they did was they first of all decided that they would declare force majeure in the Act itself. So they said epidemic, flood, etc., which would affect the implementation of GST would be declared as a force majeure. And then they give the power to the government to issue notifications for extending due dates. Next. So this is the benefit as far as GST is concerned. Rate of interest for taxpayers having turnover up to 5 crores in the preceding financial year, where your principal place of business in Tamil Nadu. The month of February 2020, if you had filed your GSTR 3B by 30th June, then no interest. Thereafter, it is 9% interest, but you should file your return by 30th September. So each month there is some kind of, for example, take the month of June 2020. Your return due date normally would have been in July. You now have time up to 23rd September to file the return. So long as you file within 23rd September 2020, there is no interest. But after that, if you file after 30th September, you will have an interest of 9%. GST has caused its own challenges in terms of working capital. Why? Now, I am a supplier. I'm a small supplier or a middle-level supplier. In this COVID scenario, I have somehow manufactured goods, I've produced goods, I've managed to supply the goods to my buyer, raise an invoice for 1 lakh and charge 18% GST. Now I have to get that money. My buyer is in trouble. He also goes to working capital cycles. He is also going to working capital management. And in his list of priority, the vendor comes last. And therefore, I'm not getting money. Now I don't get the money, but the due date comes. I have to pay the GST. So this becomes a huge challenge. Because through various forums, I've tried to represent to the government saying that let's get back to a system where GST should be payable on receipt basis rather than billing basis. That gives at least for a 1 year period or 2 years period. That can give some relief during COVID times, but no answer from the government. Then the second challenge for a GST issue is that I have to file my return. And the return through the portal will not be accepted unless I pay the tax. And when I pay the tax, I'll use my ITC also. So in case there is a delay in filing my return, the department says you have to pay interest on the input tax credit portion also. And there we fought and won battles by saying that interest should not be collected on the tax credit portion, because the tax credit portion is nothing but the tax paid by my supplier, and government has already got the money. Then the third issue in GST is what are my ITC post-COVID? For example, the way of doing business has changed. Today you have to be careful from the person. From the way the person enters the area, you have special gadgets to ensure that his fever status is measured. You have gadgets to ensure that sanitizer is not touched. He uses a leg and something gets splashed in his hands. And then you have special equipment to wear, gloves to be worn. Distancing requires machines to be separated. You have all kinds of new things which you have invested in because of COVID. A lot of companies spend tons of money just to ensure that they can comply with it, because one inspection can finish you off. Your factory can get closed. If 2 or 3 people get COVID positive, and the local person can completely seal your factory. And therefore, a lot of money is spent on these new things. The question is whether I can claim input tax credit on that. Obviously, yes, because all this expenditure is only for the purpose of business. You're incurring all this expense for the purpose of business, and therefore you are entitled to credit. The larger issue for smaller as well as bigger companies is refunds. If I export, I'm entitled to refund. The refund is not coming on time. It's taking a lot of time. So ideally, they should implement a system where an exporter should be able to procure goods or services without GST. Why should you pay GST upfront and then ask for refund? Doesn't make sense. Times have to change. These are unprecedented times, and therefore you have to change the law to ensure that people actually get a benefit. Next. So going back to the last slide for my day before I open the box for questions. First of all, we need to understand that every legal concept that we know for so many years will be revisited. And new decisions are likely across the world. So you may have new interpretations coming in, and contract clauses play a very critical role. So past transactions, you have to revisit your contract and see where you stand. fresh contracts, fresh businesses, be very careful when you sign your contracts. Don't simply sign the dotted line. Look at what are your rights, what are your obligations, what are your duties, where you're going to stand. It's very important that you understand that. And we are into digital economy very quickly and very early. In fact, just before COVID, my book got released. I had written a book called Taxation of Digital Economy. And I had analyzed the impact of digital economy in the world and what kind of tax issues and business issues arise out of digital economy. And in my wisdom, I had looked at this kind of scenario happening 2 years from now. And COVID had completely advanced the whole thing. Today, everything is digital. Anything that is possible on the virtual mode will happen. Consulting will be virtual. Seminars will be virtual. Today, we are looking at a webinar like this. There are so many webinars happening across the country. So just imagine the scenario later on. Why would they would look at cost efficiencies? Why would you take a hotel, organize a meeting, organize a digital presentation, organize a screen, organize food, and get it done, and for all those things, and getting delegates for those events where you can just like that on a virtual mode, get your people to come in. So the world will completely absorb. So that I would call it as a digital twin. For everything that is physical, there will be an equal digital methodology. So there is every possibility that you will have to revisit the way you do business. And if you're in a position to quickly understand and grasp this reality, that things will not go back to the old times and things will not go back to the old ways. Instead of waiting for things to go back to the old methodologies, embrace the new methodologies, embrace the new technology, embrace the new ways of doing business. Adequate safety. There'll be a balance, of course. I'm not saying the whole thing will become digital. But if you're able to do that, then your chances of survival and excelling in the new environment is much, much higher than a player who would wait for things to go back to the old system. And you're also going to have challenges in terms of lockdown and opening at different points of time. For example, your customer in Gujarat, not Gujarat, one of the best example, your customer in some other state in the country, would probably have a ease in lockdown and would be ready for business, whereas you could be in a state where it is not yet ready to open up and do business, and therefore likely that you might lose a market. So you must be ready for losing a market and grasping another market, or finding out solutions, finding out partners in that state to ensure you don't lose the market. So a lot of quick decision making has to be done. You need to be constantly aware of what all is happening in the country as well as the globe, because like many foreign customers will keep quiet. When they keep quiet, you need to be worried. Because why are they keeping quiet? That means that they're weighing your capability to supply goods. If India continuously goes through this, what will I do? So they would quickly look at another supply chain. They look at another source of supply. What is a backup supply? Companies will develop what is called as business continuity plan. So if you BCP would be always relevant. And at any point of time, they will quickly say that, look, you are not ready to supply, therefore I have to look at somebody else. So we have to be ready for all those things and move forward. Courts have moved very quickly to virtual mode. All of us have got into virtual courts. It's quite a challenge in terms of laptops and gadgets at the same time and connectivity, but still courts have moved very rapidly in that, and things are happening. Arbitration will be digital going forward. Banks have to play a critical role in helping out businesses, but how much are they living up to the role is always a matter of debate. There are also possibility of special courts for COVID-related disputes, is what I'm predicting at some point of time. So next is my last slide, I think. Yes, with that, I would thank Business Clinique for this opportunity, and I hope I was able to share some of the insights into business, legal, and tax. With that, I will give it to Ram to pass on to give me the questions, if any, which I can take up to the extent possible.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir. That was really very, very helpful. I think a lot of the questions that were there in our minds were answered. A lot of the questions that people had submitted while registrations were also covered, while registering for the session were also covered by you very nicely. And woven almost like really a good story around this, and things that are very difficult to understand also was like put out by you in such a simple manner that we could all get it. So really, really thank you so much. Before we go into the Q&A, just one announcement. Actually, we'll have Q&A for the next 20 minutes to 30 minutes, and then post that we are also planning a networking. So we have this facility of breakout room. So we are planning a short networking session. So people who can stay on for that are welcome to stay on. People who want to ask questions are requested to either unmute themselves and ask, or post it on chat. And I will then, convey those questions to Mr. Vaitheeswaran. There are already a few questions that have come in. So, is it okay, sir, if I ask?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. So, there's a question from Mr. Venkatraman. What is your advice to companies which do not have adequate documentation to show that they have suffered from access issues, red zones, etc.?
Well, your documentation is actually government documentation. So I would suggest whichever state you're operating, visit that website. And government today is fully e-governance, and every single decision of the government on account of COVID, whether it's identifying red zone areas or closure, etc., is communicated. And therefore, you can build up a file based on government data itself. And that itself should take care of your requirement to prove that you're the red zone.
Sure. And there's a question from Mr. Vijay Kumar. What happens to the contribution to PM CARES before 1st April? Do we get exemption? Also, there's another question. He's asking if you can comment on the security of bank deposits.
Well, I'll take the second question. I think it's there in everybody's mind, given the fact that fixed deposits and bank deposits are the only solace that we have today in terms of reasonable return. Well, there was this massive bill that was introduced, and one of the clauses in the bill was a controversial one, where that clause tried to say that you may have to, as a depositor, you also have to bear some element of loss if something goes defunct. But that bill was objected to the nail by everybody, public and across every sector, and it was referred to the select committee of the parliament and did not see the light of the day. There are WhatsApp stories that there is a new bill that is on, but honestly, I have not seen that bill. WhatsApp is the only university that spits out news every day. And interestingly, I have an aged mother at home who's 82 plus, and every day she'll come and slowly walk and ask me a question. Sir, she should say, gold Allah, this government is going to take over. I said, WhatsApp. Yes, then I'm not answering the question. Anything other than WhatsApp, I'll answer it. It's so sad, because they are vulnerable people, and their only source of information is this gadget, and so much of news which is unauthenticated keeps coming. So one of them is this fixed deposit related thing. I'm not completely putting past a scenario where a somewhat similar bill can come like what happened last time, but that would have its toll. It would not be easy to push through, because today the deposits are the only savior today in that sense. And anyway, your insurance is only up to 5 lakhs. You're not adequately protected. So what you should do is, you should look at banks' profile. You should look at their history. You should look at their stories, and put your money in places where you kind of feel it is secure, and probably spread it across. You can't trust. You can't go by like the earlier days, chit fund days, and the schemes were there. All kinds of 18% scheme, 25% scheme, and all. Don't fall for all those things. Little bit conservative approach is definitely safe. That is as far as the bank question is concerned. As far as PM CARES fund is concerned, the amendment is only from 1/4/2020, and that is the context of assessment year 2021. So you should not have a problem.
Sure. There is a question from Mr. Kaushik. Can there be a downward revision of salaries with respect to labor laws?
See, two things. One set of journalists filed a petition before the Supreme Court saying that some of them have been sacked and their pay has been cut down, and therefore it is violative of the National Disaster Management Act. That came before Supreme Court. Another set of businesses filed a petition for the Supreme Court saying that a National Disaster Management Act cannot compel me to pay salaries because I don't have money. If I don't have money, I don't have resources, I don't have sales, how can I give wages alone to the businesses? So what the Supreme Court said is, they said we can't give directions either way. It is up to you to sit with the laborers and as well as the labor commissioner and work out a negotiation or settlement. So let me put it this way. If you are in a manufacturing sector, if you have a lot of activity with workers and you have labor agreements and labor commission, etc., you have to go through that route. You have to go through that route of negotiation and work it out. If you are in some segment where you don't have that kind of system, but you have employees ideally as a CEO or as a owner of the enterprise, you can have a friendly chat with all your employees and explain to them that this is the story. Next 3 months, this is the story. Next 6 months, this is the story. Therefore, unless and until all of us cut our what expectations, we can't survive. And if we can't survive, the whole thing goes. It's like cutting the tree. And therefore, many cases, employees come forward and say, okay, what is your strategy? So ideally, you should put them into 3 boxes. One, a big cut for people who are having a lot of salary, so to say. Their demands, their expense may be more, but from, you have to take a universal view. And then not cut much for the lower strata or the smaller level salaries, and keep everybody at peace to the extent possible, and give a time frame. Look, this will happen this is our cash flow planning for 6 months, this is cash flow planning for 9 months, and then keep them on the loop. You'll be surprised how much of cooperation you get from your employees than arbitrarily saying that, I'm going to knock off things like that.
Thank you. There is a question from Mr. Rajsekaran. Will GST rates get rationalized now because of COVID? Is that possible?
See, it is screaming for rationalization because unlike other countries, we have multiple rates. Interestingly, I speak in so many forums and corporate segments where I talk about GST. I had an interesting scenario where I had to speak for about half an hour in my wife's class, where she was teaching accounts for 12th standard students. She said that you are talking about GST all over. Why don't you come and tell our 12th standard students, because they have a chapter on GST. So it was quite a tough assignment because students are very different from corporate clients and employees. So I tried to package it very differently and spoke to them. So I sort of asked them questions. So I asked them, which do you think will have the highest GST rate as a commodity? Out of 30 students, 25 of them said jewelry. And then I told them jewelry is the lowest in GST. So they were surprised. They said, what nonsense, jewelry should be taxed at the highest rate. That is their perspective. But in reality, jewelry is taxed at the lowest rate. So we have multiple rates. We have already compromised GST in a big way. This is not the GST that exists in Europe, or this is not the VAT that exists in Europe or GST in Australia. We completely messed it up. And given the fact that we have 7 or 8 rates, you will have classification disputes. Forever, you will have, for example, there was a recent dispute as to whether parota and chapati is one and the same. This kind of mind-boggling disputes are, waste of time of courts. But that's what's going to happen if you have multiple rates. So I think this is the right time for some kind of convergence. See what all you can bring into 3 baskets or 2 baskets and try to bring it. Yes, your point is valid. This is a time to bring in some kind of change, but this is also a difficult time, so they may not quickly push it, but they will go in the direction.
On the interest rate, a question from Mr. Chandas is asking, from your vantage point, do you see further drop in interest rates?
I have to pass that question. I am not a financial expert. Sorry.
Question from Mr. Sivaraman, and this is related to Mr. Vijay Kumar's question earlier. Are nearly sovereign investments like LIC investments, PSU bonds, tax-free bonds, RBI bonds safe? What about PPF?
See, government is always the safe bet. If government bonds are going to collapse, then that's the end of the story. So I don't think, at least India's history has, we pledged our goal to ensure that we are not violating our foreign payments. That's been our history. So government is always, some kind of sovereign touch to it will be safe. Therefore, in fact, post office and PPF will be in full action. Because surprisingly, the post office rates of interest are slightly higher than the other rates of interest that you see. So it's some kind of say, but then you as I said, put into multiple baskets so that you don't get you leverage your risk.
There's a question from Mr. Nataraj. Do you think the IT department will look at companies with sympathy when our taxes drop, or even when we slip into a loss due to pandemic?
Equity and sympathy don't go along with taxes. So tax department today will be sympathetic. Oh yes, go. They will ask all those things. But when it comes to action, recovery, etc., they are still driven by their own policies. And see, at the top level, there can be some communication that recovery action will be a little bit less for some time, but you will be asked questions. For example, knowing fully well that your business has dropped, somebody is going to ask you a question, why your advance taxes come down. But it's up to you to ensure that you reply, saying that, look, my sales was 100 before, my sales is 15 now. Can't you see the 85 drop? So obviously my taxes are also going to drop. And keep your newspaper articles, which talk about advanced tax collections being less, etc. All that in readiness at some point of time. Use it.
There's a question from Mr. Chandas on tax-related question. Is this a good year to clean up your balance sheet without attracting attention from the tax authorities?
Cleaning up balance sheet is always welcome, sir. Any year you want to clean up your mess and history to the extent possible, please do it. And if you're lucky to get away because you don't have investors breathing on your neck, and a loss here can be a very good loss here, something like that.
Sure. While I read the next set of questions, inviting others to also please post your questions. If you want, you can also unmute and ask questions. So next question is from Mr. Mahendran. He's saying, is there a possibility of revised labor laws in terms of wages, timing, welfare between states, given the fact that we have witnessed a long exodus?
Yes, it is going to happen in a very big way. I think UP has already started something in this direction. They've relaxed significantly the labor law requirements. There is people who are interested can check the latest draft wage committee proposals. There is a wage committee which is there is a complete change in what is the wage system that is going to happen. A lot of business have represented on relaxation of working hours, overtime hours, etc. This is one side. The other side is that there is also overworking. See, what happens is when you're working from home, and home starts early in the morning. So you wake up at, let us say, 6 o'clock, you go for a walk in your terrace, come back around 6:45, sit down on the sofa, you open your laptop. It's human, it requires tremendous amount of discipline not to do work. You need a different skill set to define working hours. So what happens is you start working at 6:45, 7 in the morning. If you are a kind who will finish off all your emails by 8 o'clock, 8:30 and your basic work is done, you upload in all this Outlook and keep everything ready, you will do more work. If you are a workaholic, you will end up doing more work. There are people who fall sick because they're doing more work. There are others who try to say, okay, this is my working hours. I'll redefine myself, go to office at 8:30, come out at 1 o'clock, go to again at 2 o'clock and come out at 6 o'clock. It's up to you to define. But if you don't define, there's going to be overworking. So what's going to happen? There will be guidelines to prevent overworking also, because labor law is always labor oriented, labor friendly. Therefore, they have to ensure that people are not exploited. So there will be guidelines to that effect also, declarations and things like that. In fact, there were some accusations in the news item about some kind of spyware in laptops, which will ask you questions. Why do you take more than a 10-minute toilet break? Those kind of things are also happening.
Yeah. So while more questions come on chat, I will ask. There are a couple of questions from the people during the registration time. So there was a question around: is there a threat of multinational companies absorbing thriving MSMEs now that the definition of MSME has changed?
Very good question, because the MSME definition alteration has made almost everybody an MSME. So today, apart from micro, many of them would fit into medium and small. And there is an advantage because you get your money from your that is the biggest advantage. And this Udyog Aadhaar registration is there, the MSME website. It's a very good website. You can register yourself as a business Aadhaar. Now, whether acquisitions will increase? Yes, there will be acquisitions, there will be mergers. That's the way to grow. So it's up to you to take a call. Ultimately, nobody can force you to buy, or force you to sell. You are looking at how much of future do you see for your company, how much of battle you can take for the next few years, or are you looking at a valuation perspective and exiting? That's a businessman's call, entrepreneur's call. But there will be a lot of offers. There will be a lot of interesting offers, because there could be a good company which is going through some kind of trouble, and there could be a buyer with a lot of cash resources. So it's a good time to look at mergers. It's a good time to look at acquisitions. You can also look at downward acquisitions to see what you're looking at currently, whether you can get it from somebody else. Vendors could be converted to job workers. Job workers could be converted to vendors. So many things can happen.
Thank you, sir. There's a question from Mr. Muralidharan. There is a time limit of 1 year for GST paid material to be returned to the supplier. Can the time limit get extended given the COVID-19 lockdown?
I would rephrase the question. It's not a question of time limit for returning the goods. There is a time limit for, I'll put it in a better example. Let us say I'm a supplier and I've sold goods to Mr. Ram. And today is what? July 15th. So I've sold goods on July 15th to Mr. Ram, and I paid GST. And Mr. Ram decides to reject the goods or return the goods for some reason. So he returns it, let's say 2 months from now, 3 months from now. Now I've already paid the GST on this transaction, and I don't want to lose that GST. So what I would do is I would issue a credit note to Mr. Ram, and then based on the fact that the credit note has been issued by a specified period of time, this is where time limit comes in. I can say that the tax that I paid, I can use it for some other GST payment because the first transaction has been neutralized. So there is a time limit for issue of credit note in respect of invoices. So there is a cutoff date. For example, the cutoff date is October. Let us assume 31st March 2020. The cutoff date is October for the due date for filing the return for the month of September. So going forward, it is a good point to represent, to say that these are all unrealistic dates. Forget return. Your goods could be stuck in transit. The lorry person might have abandoned the goods and gone somewhere. You would have supplied. Halfway through, lockdown might have happened. He had his fear of life. He abandoned the lorry, abandoned the goods and went off somewhere. You don't know where he is.
Yeah.
Goods are also lost somewhere. So there will be enough situations like that. So it is good point to represent, and I'm sure government will take a very lenient view in changing the law.
There is a question from Mr. Kaushik. What are the rights of a MSME with regards to getting money from clients? And he says he runs a micro company. So he says, what are the rights of a MSME with regards to getting money from clients?
See, once you are registered as an MSME, then the Act takes over. And therefore, all your buyers will send you a flyer saying that, are you registered as MSME? Are you falling under MSME? And you have to say yes or no. The moment you say yes, the payment modules which those companies have will flag this MSME status, and therefore automatically the buyers will ensure that the money is paid to you by the time limit stipulated in the Act. I'm not able to give you the exact time limit, but the advantage of being an MSME supplier is that you're assured of your money coming in by the due dates, because the buyer not paying will make him a violator in the MSME Act, which is very seriously viewed under the MSME Act, and action is taken. And there are enough history of action being taken.
A question on the state of the economy. Mr. Sivaraman is asking, in your informal assessment, to what extent is overall Indian economy down in Q1, Q2 and FY21? And he's saying that there are some strong negative signs coming in some sectors and few green signs, positive signs coming from some others. So he wants your opinion, your view on to what extent is the Indian economy down and what's the trends look like?
I can tell you from my experience and from whatever chats I've had with many of the CEOs and other clients whom I deal with, though I can't name them, but from whatever chat I've had is that March was terrible, April was terrible, May showed some slight signs, and June is showing some degree of promise. And they're all very clear that this year is not going to be great. There is no way they're saying that this year will completely turn around itself and change itself and become better. They're looking at Q2 of 2021 as to be some sign of better growth. But government, on the other hand, is announcing that there are signs of growth, etc. You cannot disbelieve the government also on this, because if you look at FMCG sector, they seem to be doing very well. The one sector which seemed to be quite on the bullish front seems to be FMCG. Most of the products are selling quite well. And we're not able to predict as to why they're selling so well, because one theory is that people are staying at home, they're eating a lot of biscuits. That's a very, very ridiculous theory that is floating around. But people are here from ITC, they should know better. I have no business to talk on how this is done. But I'm able to see that the FMCG and the new commodities, for example, health products, healthcare products, obsession with health, obsession with cleanliness, obsession with clean water. These things are going to bring in new product profiles. Of course, Uber may not have a very great market because your work from home will completely change that. So there will be some industries which will get affected. Some industries will be newborn. Some industries will see a better light. And for example, digital will be all the way through, and you will have films getting released. You had 1 or 2 Tamil films and Hindi films getting released on Netflix. You will soon have a release in Netflix or Amazon where you have to pay to watch. So it will not be a subscription. So just like buying a ticket, you'll have to pay to watch the film on the first day. So you could watch it on like that also. Everything would change. Everything would become digital. So to a large extent, I think Indian economy, as Indian entrepreneurs and businesses have the resilience and the innovative skills to jump back. The question is, how much is their enthusiasm to jump back? And of course, we also have this global impact of what is going to happen in China, whether new business are going to come from China to India, or it will go to Vietnam, or it will go to Cambodia. Of course, you have huge competition from those countries. But India has got the best tax rates now. Today, the tax rates of India is quite competitive compared to these countries. So investments are likely. And you had this Google announcement a few days back. So there are good signs also. It depends on which. As I said, it's very difficult to say that all sectors will do well, but some sectors will do exceedingly.
Sir, you spoke about digital and some of the sudden changes that have happened. So some things that have got accelerated. There is a question around what are 3 key skill upgradations you would recommend based on what you're saying, what you're seeing in the industry right now? 3 key skills that people could upgrade on.
Technology. There is first of all, whatever fears or whatever reservation that you had against technology, time to let go. It is time to let go all those things, and probably people who are very senior, keep your grandchild next to you and let them teach you. They're probably the best teachers, and they would completely help you navigate. And it requires navigation skills. Even today's remote is quite complicated. The television remote is as complicated as a complex economic problem. So technology is definitely the key. Second is willingness to learn new things. Your ability to embrace and accept new things that will change your way. In fact, the book Who Moved by Cheese is still relevant. It was a very simple book at some point of time, but if today you take in COVID times and read the book, it's still relevant. And if you're able to look at way things are happening around your business or something closer to your business and the rapid change that are happening in the world and how well you're placed to grasp them, how well you're able to predict its applicability to your business, then your skill is clear. Therefore, I would only say that your inert skills have to be sharpened. You don't have to acquire new skills. Otherwise you wouldn't have established a business. You wouldn't have been at this position. You just have to, whatever is latent has to be brought out. And as I said, technology will be very, very important. And have a good young team which supports you. Hire good talent, hire raw talent, encourage as much of delegation as possible. This is the best time to do it. And given the fact that everybody is out of work and everybody is at home, for example, all your top people could be sitting at home and your production could be 30% of your normal levels. This is the probable time to give brainstorming to all of them. Ask them to come up with ideas. Do some kind of casual Zoom chat with all of them or web chat with all of them to see what kind of new innovation they can come up with. They'll come up with some brilliant ideas. So what you did not have time to do, this is the time to do.
So Mr. Muralidharan has reframed this question on the GST regarding to material return to supplier. I'm just reading it out. I'll just invite him to maybe, I'm unmuting him. I'll just invite him to ask you that question himself.
Please.
Mr. Muralidharan, if you could unmute and ask the question yourself.
Yeah, sure. Am I audible?
Welcome, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible, sir. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Vaitheeswaran, the issue is like this. There is a schedule from the customer. I ship the material. In the meanwhile, he has cancelled the schedule. The goods are lying with the transport agency. He promised to take later. That later date that never happened. In the meanwhile, 1 year has passed by since the time I sold the material, not invoiced by the customer. As far as the supplier is concerned, it is a sale. In my books, I have paid GST. As far as the customer is concerned, he has not invoiced the material. Now, 12 months have gone by. If I have to get my GST back, he has to return the material with rejected documents. The time has elapsed. How do I help avoiding loss of GST?
See, this is not a typical credit note scenario where goods have been rejected by the buyer. Goods have been refused by the buyer in the sense that he has not even accepted the goods or invoiced the goods. And therefore, it is lying at the transporter's godown. So, ideally, this is just a shot in the dark. People have not tried this, but I've recommended this for some of the clients. I've said that a supply requires two parties, a supplier and a recipient. So if you have a scenario where the recipient has not even accepted the transaction, you should be in a position to take a view that the supply itself has not materialized, or I would call it an unfructified supply. And therefore, whatever GST I paid, I ought not to have paid. So take efforts to bring back the goods, record the goods receipt in your system, and then make an application for refund of the GST paid earlier by stating out that the supply is no longer relevant. Without supply, how can there be a GST? I don't see you getting relief at the first level, but it could be a litigation which is worthwhile if the amount is significant or at least decent.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for your advice.
One last question, sir. So the question around what kind of innovations can business do? I mean, from what you're seeing around you, you see, you said, what can people do with digital, etc. What are some of the business innovations that are possible given that the scenario has emerged?
See, your ability to reach worldwide is phenomenal. Who would have thought this webinars would be like this? Who would have thought, for example, take my own firm. We are doing client consulting virtually. And normally I would appear in Jodhpur High Court or Delhi High Court. Now, all the way traveling 2 days, 3 days. Because, tomorrow morning is a hearing. I can't take a risk of an early morning flight. I go the previous day. Now, virtual hearing, I'm able to sit here and argue the matter. So the vistas have really opened up. So if you're able to see where you can take advantage of this new innovations, these were there. Zoom was there years ago. Now Zoom became popular only thanks to COVID. So if you're able to take advantage, if you're in consulting, for example, virtual consulting is the key. You should be able to position yourself in virtual consulting. If you're able to advise, if you're an advisory segment, there are definite possibilities that your markets can extremely, you can just expand. So you have to project yourself, you have to skill yourself, and then make yourself available in those markets. Be part of bodies and associations where you will be noticed and you'll be demanded. Your skills will be under demand. So it's something which you have to constantly do. It won't happen overnight, but it will be a slow but steady growth.
Sir, if I can have your permission, I'll just take one more question because questions are keeping on coming. So I guess, it's very difficult to get your time. Now that you are here, people are like really keen on getting some questions answered. So Mr. Abraham is asking, what are the main areas which a CFO of a medium scale unit is not supposed to miss out in this pandemic period while monitoring the financial status?
Very, very interesting question, and I'm glad that he asked the question. All CFOs are broadly qualified, very well qualified, and I don't think they're going to miss anything. But what could happen is that there have been too many changes. Every day there is a notification. Every day there is a change in the due dates. So it requires some degree of patience and skill to navigate through these notifications. And a lot of patience is required in understanding these things. So if you are in whatever businesses are in, you obviously know the laws that are applicable and the dates that are applicable, that are due dates and compliance. So for a CFO, the focus must be to ensure that the company does not get pulled up for a breach, which can be his responsibility. So compliance could be a very, very critical responsibility. So if that responsibility is addressed, that is major part is handled. That can be effectively controlled and delegated also. Second is, he is the best judge in terms of working capital management. So he knows what is critical for the businesses. He has to chat with his managing director and then sometimes take a position which may be contrary to what the managing director feels. So as a finance man, he knows the finance requirements much better than the owner. The owner might say, why are you not spending on this? But this may not be the top priority at this point of time. So it requires tremendous amount of persuasive skills. So he must have his facts marshaled. He must prepare budgets for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, etc. Plan all those things. Be conservative in terms of business growth and receivables, and then work out cash flow. And wherever possible, squeeze out funds from sources which you can squeeze out. Negotiate as much as you can. Get your discounts as much as you can, so that you are able to somewhat have a healthy 6 to 8 months, and then things will change.
Thank you so much, sir. I mean, more than 1 hour of presentation and then half an hour of back-to-back questions you have answered from people, and people are really thankful. They are messaging on chat. I'll now request Mr. Rajshekaran to come in and the vote of.
So thank you very much, sir. I think we really enjoyed your speech, and patiently answering all the questions. Now